Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Security by Default podcast. I'm the host of the show, Joe Carson. I'm the chief evangelist at Segura, and really excited. For me, such a fantastic episode today. This is a person who I've been watching and listening to and going to his talks all around the world. So it's a pleasure and an honor to have a great friend, Filipi, join me for today's podcast. So Filipi, if you want to give the audience a bit of a background about, your origin story, how you get into the industry, what you enjoy doing, and some of the things you get up to today.
Thank you so much, Joe, for having me here. And it's a pleasure again to talk to you. So since the last time that we met, we were together on the RSA, I think. On our RSA,
even Sao Paulo.
Yeah, exactly. Sao Paulo a few days ago, actually. Yeah, I'm getting old, man. Sorry for that.
And same for me too. I was like, what was the last time?
Yeah, exactly. So again, thank you so much. And so I'm Filipi Pires, and I'm work with the cybersecurity field for the last 10 years, I think. In technology, more than 15 years. Like few things about me, I have the quite different journey in the industry, let's say. Yeah, because I was graduated in sales and let's say the process management. And after that, I decided to move into the technical career. Why I do that? Because it's the people work in the technical career, and after that they move into the sales. But I do the opposite. So why I do this? Because basically, the thing that I saw in the market in the past, I think in 2010, like 15 years ago, and the best like sales guy in the market was the guy that had the technical background. It was not my case in that time. So because of that, I decided to move into the technical career. However, after to move into the technical career, it was like the passion for the first time. Like I simple learn how the technical things works. And I decide, okay, I can do different here. And of course, I had many challenges because I didn't have the technical background. And in 2015, actually, the cybersecurity or security things decided to choose me. And I'm not the guy that, chose the area. Actually, the cybersecurity chose me. And that's the real story behind of this, or behind the scenes, as we was talking later. And so I work as a defensive side when I was a sales engineer at Trend Micro, and after that I moved into Poland. I live in Poland for a few years as a penetration tester, and was a very nice experience to work in the other side, let's say in the field, because I was a defensive guy. So after I moved into the offensive guy, so thinking in both way actually, and after that came the pandemic, and I received an offer to move into Brazil, not to moving, but to returning to Brazil. And by the way, I'm Brazilian, and yeah, that exactly.
Important note.
I'm not sure if it's important or not, but I'm like a Brazilian, and yes, so now I'm living here. I don't know where I'm living. I think inside of the airplane, maybe.
I know
actually. Yeah. So actually, I'm right now I'm living here in Portugal, but I don't know. Tomorrow I'm leaving Dallas. I'm actually split my time living in Dallas, out of Dallas, and here in Portugal, and because of the job I was.
Yep.
I'm in US actually, and yes, after 2020 working in Brazil, I was working as a threat research in the Brazilian company. And I decided to move to another country. So based on that, I moved into Portugal, and I work, as a research. And that time I started to work at Segura. And before we call Senha Segura, but Senha, it means password in Portuguese language, and Security means secure. And it was a very nice journey. And now I'm head of Identity Threat Labs, so I'm responsible for, doing investigations and understand how the attacker are, collecting credentials and doing different techniques to explore, identities and how. Actually, this is a very interesting topic, by the way, Joy, because so in the past when I was a sales engineer at Trend Micro, so I was studying about the malware, how the malware works. But in fact, for the malware, like doing a kind of infection in the machine, the user in this machine specifically, they need to have a kind of permissions. So we're talking about identity, and in the end of the day, everything is about identity, and that's the key. So basically, that's my main role at Segura. Do investigations and talking conference based on some research that I'm doing and presenting conference like Black Hat, AFCON, RSA, B-Sides, and other conference. So that's
some of the most premium top conferences around the world and it's always, to see you speaking at those events is definitely fantastic, because it definitely means that you're educating the world and a lot of the research you're doing. What's some of the fun research you're doing at the moment? Is there anything specific that you're looking into? Anything that you're finding that's hot and interesting?
Actually, I'm doing some research about the PDF malicious. I'm like this specifically topic because usually I like to do kind of research not so specifically for like 0-day things that are interesting, of course, but I'm prefer to study things more practical. Let me just to explain more in details. So I prefer to do kind of research focus on use case. For example, so my previous research was about how the attacker are exploring like financials organizations or not exactly organization, but the financial team and ATR team or people team or talent acquisition team. Why? Because the normal day they need to open a lot of PDFs, like for example, invoice for the financial perspective, the financial team, and for the talent acquisition team, we are talking about the CVs, resumes, So that's the normal activities. So open PDFs. So thinking about the attacker can explore those environments, and or how the flow of this type of technology works, like each talking about the people team, like the HR team. So they have a device. Inside of this device has an application focused on specifically for HR. So they receive the CVs from maybe LinkedIn or another source. So they receive those PDFs. They need to open their machine, and usually this application requires the administrator access. So based on that, this user requires the high privilege from this specific identity, and so this is the flow of the organization. So thinking about the attacker perspective, how the attacker can explore those identities. So that's one way that I like to do kind of research. And of course, another research that I'm doing is about the cloud, how the attacker exploring misconfigurations in the cloud. This is the two main topics, let's say.
Absolutely. And what's some of the most common tools that you use in order to do the research? Using commercial-based tools, things like
no.
paid
Usually
solutions, or is most open source?
Yeah, usually I prefer using more. I'm getting old now, but I'm kind of how can I say that? I'm more old school guy, so I like to use more the open source tools, and I like to do kind of manual analysis. For example, for the PDF perspective, I like to use the PDF ID to identify how many objects we can find in the object. And after that, I like to use the PDF parser to do kind of parsers and to see each object I can find it specifically embedded things like URLs or URI or maybe JavaScript encoded, for example. And after that, I go using another tool. I can use in kind of, PDFTK, for example, to uncompress or decompress. And I know that one of the conference that I was speaking, I think 2 months ago, one of those guys came to me and he said that the PDF Pi, they, restart the project again. I didn't know that, but I didn't use it because they like archive the project, but they decided to open again. So usually I like to use more than one tool for specific activities. Like for example, for if you think about the offensive perspective, for example, I like to use, for example, Deerbuster and WFuzz, for example, is the two different tools for the same usability, let's say. But I prefer to use more than one tool just to compare the results, and maybe one tool works better than another for some reasons and something like this.
Yeah, I'm the same. I switch between. So if you understand the core concept, the fundamentals, and you do it manually, it means that you can easily switch between tools. So you're not learning the tool, you're learning the technique. and that technique then becomes universal. So I absolutely agree. Using things like, WFuzz or even FUF, they have different benefits that you can do sometimes. They're better subdirectories, better domains, subdomains. So they have different kind of values. And ultimately, when you're basically doing those types of techniques, you can switch between the tool in order to make sure you're getting the most value and automation that you need. So that's definitely my preference. And I think that everyone who's getting in the industry, don't learn tools, learn a technique. And then the technique becomes universal.
Yeah, exactly. This is a it's a very nice point that you mentioned, because that's one of my main, let's say, advice for the students and the attendees. I was talking this week. I was speaking at the C Days, one of the most traditional event here in Portugal, in Estoril. This is the name of the city. And I was explaining to the attendees, I don't like when I present something and the guys look at me and say, okay, wow, this guy speaks very good and the talk is super technical. And in the end of the day, they didn't understand nothing and they cannot put in anything in practical. So I don't like that. I prefer, I like to say, okay, they can put in practical in the next Monday. Like, okay, they learn something in my pitch and next Monday they can put in this thing specifically in their job. That's my main concern when I talk something. Based on that, when I present some tools, I like to share something about, okay, how this tool works, how this tool really works in the deeply way. For example, the string. When you type some string to search for some ladder or something like this, usually the string just printing at least 4 characters, not 2 or 3, at least 4. So because of that, when you execute something like strings for some PE files, for example, portable executable, they never print the MZ, for example, the first 2 binaries in the file, because it is just 2 characters, and if you see the strings just printed just at least 4. The same thing is about file type, for example.
The magic bits.
The magic bits, exactly. So it's easier to manipulate files and to induce the different tools to bring different results. So when you understand how the tool works, or the concept, as you said, it's totally correct. You can use more than one tool, or you can create your own tool.
Absolutely. It's one of the things that I learned when I was doing a lot of capture the flag events, that I get, I always find it, one of the trainings I give is hacking gamification. And the reason for that is that I want to teach people the method of learning, not just to get the flag and get the win and be able to compromise the machine or, get the root flag. For me, it's really about the process, the journey that you go through that. And one of the things I always teach the students is that it's not even just about learning the method of getting to the flag, but it's also about understanding why the machine's vulnerable in the first place. So even to the point where there's some machines that I have done in the CFPs or the CTFs, is that you go and I try to recreate those machines to understand about what was the configuration, what made it vulnerable in the first place. How can I actually harden that system to prevent the actual technique from working? And even to the point where sometimes there's the documented way. I also like to try and find the undocumented ways. For example, when I'm doing the capture the flags, my preference is to get a elevated shell locally and not doing reverse shells. So because connections are noisy. But sometimes I like to find, is there alternative ways to do the same thing that allows me to gain access? So absolutely, it's the journey and the process and the method of learning. We're ultimately teaching people how to learn quicker and learn better and become more of basically life students in many cases. So
that's CTF is a very nice way to learn. Mainly nowadays, if I remember, I remember in 2019 when I moved into Poland, I remember that I had quite a time to do kind of research and some study as well. So I used the Hack in the Box platform, and I remember that time it was kind of challenge or some kind of machines was unreal. It's not exactly the real scenarios. You know what I mean? And nowadays, like the Hack the Box, Try Hack Me, or they are using more realistic environment. So that's a good way to learn. Like they have specifically rooms. So you and me, we can create our proper room. We can share with the community. I think that's the way we can learn more the realistic thing. Because like, for example, steganography.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's a kind of technique.
It's an art.
Yeah,
By
so
itself.
who is the, let's say, the APT group that is using this steganography? I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, it is a very rare use. It's not something I would say. It's a technique that does get used, but very rarely. It's not common. That's the
yeah.
thing, is that you find that there is ways. So for I've seen one method of actually distributing malware using playlists from basically music playlists, because you're downloading XMLs and hidden within the XML. They can then parse it later and then basically create and compile a piece of malware. So you look at people who's being creative and trying techniques, but it's definitely, a lot of those things are more academic focused than they are real world focused, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that's what I do find is that absolutely the machines I'm seeing more recently are really close to real environments. It's sometimes, for me, it's even like, oh, I've seen this in an incident that I helped do an incident response for maybe 8-9 months ago, and this is so close to the technique. So I think definitely getting more close to real world scenarios definitely helps show people what they're dealing with. Because for me, the academic way of doing things and that I grew up on, it definitely it helps me, still helps me today, because it built that foundational knowledge, but it doesn't help me in the practical side of things.
Yeah.
It has that foundational knowledge, but not the practical sense, the simulation side. So I'd like to get into what's some of the top techniques you're seeing today in the identity threats. What are some of the most common techniques that you're finding that organizations are kind of struggling with when it comes to identities?
Yeah, let's say the thing that I'm being involved for the last few years is not exactly because like the world is super big. It's difficult to say to say like, okay, this is the main technique that I'm seeing. But the attacker that I'm seeing is most not exactly a specific technique, but is involved misconfiguration. Like we are talking a lot about machine identity and no human identity. And because the companies are creating different, or they are buying different tools to automate a different process and integrate different things. And okay, I could like say something like, okay, a golden tick attack, or, pass the hash, or, like some man in the middle. But the thing that I'm seeing and I'm talking with companies is about misconfiguration. Because let me just give an example. So I talk with some companies in Brazil and in Europe, in Germany. So they said to me, okay, so my developer team, they need to, they are starting to work in infrastructure as a code. So when they need to start the Lambda process, like one of the services in AWS, and they go to the policy in AWS, they saw the policies about the Lambda policy, and they using this specifically best practices from the AWS to using Lambda, or even if they were using no infrastructure as a code, but you're working in a traditional way, working the EC2, for example, the instance, they go to the policy in the AWS, they see for the AWS EC2 standard policy, for example. But they don't care about the bunch of actions that are inside of this specifically permissions. They just enable because it's the standard from the AWS. And that's the key. So then they came to us, and when I mean to us is about me and Segura team, and they go, okay, so we are maybe doing a kind of suffering kind of attack. So what happened is, so when we go to the deeply, we saw, okay, so the attacker collected these credentials here. And when I mean credentials, I mean, secrets and key. And these credentials key has a permissions. And when we go deeply to the policies, we can say, okay, this just attack happened because of this specifically, permission that allow the attacker doing kind of different things and escalate privilege. So in the end of the day, it's not a technique like pass the hash, golden ticket, using like Kerberos or whatever, but they are using the specifically misconfigurations or, keys and secrets exposed to the internet.
Yep, absolutely. It's one of the things I've seen quite commonly as well, is that when I think about, I did some research a couple of years ago where I took the top 10 most commonly used software in the world, that businesses typically use from an enterprise perspective. And I went through the process of, the documentation. I followed all the steps and I did the installations. 9 out of 10 of those software required you to have a highly privileged account in order to run the application. So now you're already having a service account, a machine identity that's now running those applications. Mm-hmm. So that's the first step, is now these applications are very privileged. They have access to sensitive data. Typically, they're HR systems, they're large databases, they're workforce applications, CRM applications, and you go through, and they need privileges to run. So I went through the next stage, was to understand about, okay, if I follow the documentation and I don't choose it, I don't do any change in the configuration. I just do next through the installation. And we always hear the term, that's one of the things, and that's why the name of the podcast itself, is we always hear the term security by design. And I think it's great. Design is fantastic. But design must also mean default. It means that the security has to be turned on. And if I take all of those applications and software, I do next, the default configuration is that security is not enabled. And then you get into, okay, there's ways to break out of those configurations, to spawn child processes that are running under those privileges. Or to spawn different applications or libraries that can actually inherit those privileges. And that's the challenge to your point, is that misconfiguration is causing a lot of these issues where identities get exposed, especially privileged credentials. But unfortunately, it's the misconfiguration is because they're choosing the default.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
not turning security on in the first place.
Yeah, and you bring something very interesting, because one of my talks is about misconfigurations, how the attacker explore, how I share sometimes how some Python code, how they can do using a crawler to collecting secret keys and other type of authentications things. And usually when I present something, I ask to the attendees, okay, who here work with the AWS, Azure, GCP, and wherever? And the 90% work with AWS. And my second question is, those 90%, who in the room or, in the space know about the AWS web architecture? And it usually is for this 90% only, the maximum that I saw was 10% know about the AWS web architecture. That's a big problem, because so this is the kind of guidance to implementing the AWS architecture, and by default, and they had there a kind of least privilege concept, but it's a too long framework. And that's the problem. It's too long. Yep. And usually the people don't like to read manuals.
No one reads manuals. They look at it when there's a problem.
Yeah, I don't like to. I don't like to read. But we need it, but I don't like it. But anyway, so that's the key. It's a problem for some people. And is an advantage for another people, and that's the key.
I do remember that. I think it was about 2 years ago. I'm always looking at the Verizon Data Breach Investigations report, as the annual kind of indicator about how well it's almost like our last year's scorecard into how well we're doing as an industry. And I remember that misconfigurations became one of the top methods. It overtook everything else. They had it under user error, but I always say that there's a difference between user error and misconfiguration. User error is when the user accidentally did something that caused it, but misconfiguration, in my case, that I'm always finding, is that it's because the settings are not the default. They're not elaborated, or it's too complex. They'll just say it's too complex. They can't do it, and they'll just turn it off to get the application working. And that becomes a major problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. Another interesting thing is, okay, so if we go to the reports, we will not see anything about big 0-day things came to the new companies. Usually the big data breach that we saw is about no updated software. I remember when I started working in the field in 2015, 10 years ago, the main problem was user error, the misconfiguration, patch, updated patch,
which was typically the patch was available for 1 year.
Exactly, and legacy software.
It's a massive Achilles heel for the organization.
Yeah, so if I go right now to Paris or Denmark or in US or Argentina, and I will ask some companies, okay, do you have any legacy software, and they will say, okay, I have a bunch of legacy software. So after 10 years, keeping happened is the same problem. And because of that, I think so when you talk about phishing, like phishing is just so simple for us,
It's a
maybe.
way. It's a way that, I mean, some of the more, I'd say, younger generation of attackers are using phishing to so much of their advantage. They can get the user to do what they want simply
Yeah,
by just
but
having a conversation. I do see a lot of times the legacy systems. I see it so often because we travel. We go on planes, buses, trains, hotels. And a lot of times you're looking around and you're just like, huh, okay, that's using Windows XP, or okay, that's actually got
yeah.
even if you think about end of this year, I think it's Windows 10 is coming up to end of support. So you have to think about even how old systems are to what legacy means. Sometimes we still think in my generation is XP, but I still see Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 10, and it's unlikely that they will be updated anytime soon.
Yeah, exactly. So, and we talk again, so my research is more about the use case, as I said. So, if you think about the use case, it's simple like this. So, each developer need to use the VS Code, for example. And the VS Code requires administrator
Yeah,
access, and that's it. So,
yep,
how the company works, like, isn't a startup company, or even if it's a bigger company, it's an enterprise company, as you said. So, it requires the same thing, the same, permission. So, for the use case, they need to enable. So, how the companies could mitigate that? So, they should give the just a permission from the application level,
mhm,
or for the, let's say, the device level. So that's one way that you can mitigate those type of things. But usually the company, okay, I need to give the permission for this application. Like,
yep.
this is a business. I know that's a business, but to increase the security posture, the company should look in more in details and more deeply for each
Just
specifically
in
use
time.
case.
Just in
Yeah.
time is where we really need to get to. It's where I always remember when I started off in large data centers 25 years ago. I was responsible for 100,000 servers. 100,000 servers, and we're talking about major data centers that had, pharmaceutical companies, government systems, financial, mineral mining companies. And there's me sitting on my laptop with one domain administrator, and I can simply just log on to any system that you wanted to. Because I was seen as the guy who fixed everything. It was like everyone's like, "Oh, call Joe; he could fix it." But that was the case. But I realized that the risk that exposed was so massive that if you've got one domain credential that you're using on a daily basis to
Hmm.
access all those systems, that becomes a massive, basically high risk. And that was always kind of where I really embraced the principle of least privilege and application control and the
Hmm.
ability of having PAM solutions, do just in time access. Because what I always remember is it was where I got into the world of virtualization, and there was a massive time in the late 2000s, roughly around 2007, 2008, we were trying to move to this, what was called as non-persistent VDI. And I was one of the kind of innovators of trying to make that possible. And during that time, I remembered that actually, we also need to move away from persistent privilege to actually just in time, non-persistent privilege, meaning that you get the privilege when you need it at the time for the task on the system for doing that specific, maybe service ticket that you might have, or upgrade, or application execution, or running a report. That really then limits the time that attackers can expose those systems, because ultimately it's when attackers have unlimited time and get access to systems that have persistent privilege, that's where basically they win. And
Hmm.
we had to eliminate the time window and the persistent privilege away, and that will makes the attacker's job as difficult as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. So everything in the end of the day,
Mhm.
even for 20 years ago, is about identity. The thing that we in the past we didn't talk about that. We did
Yep,
talk in a different way, but
and
it's
today it's
identity and permission.
today it's more and more even difficult because when I was doing 20 years ago, I had my one account for my day-to-day job, my email, my communication, access to company resources, and then I had my privilege account. So two accounts. If you think of today, with machine identities, non-human identities, bots, agentic AI, tasks, backup jobs, cloud workloads. The number of identities just accelerated. I think we look back in the Gartner report. I mean, when I did a calculation about 10 years ago, it was like 1 to 5. You had, for every one human account, you had 5 non-human or machine identities. And then a couple of years ago, Gartner said it was like 1 to 45. And now, I think even if we look at today, it's almost probably 1 to 100 when we introduce AI and automation. And it's just the acceleration that organizations have to manage is just unprecedented when it comes to identities.
Yeah, and nowadays we have a bunch of problems, but we can I can say 2 problems here. The first is the observability. So the companies don't know about how complex they know that it's complexity, but how they can protect their environment if they don't know how each application really works. Like they don't have observability, those integrations and all that type of things. Sorry. And the second thing is about, okay, we have a 1 to 100, access. Sorry, what is more easy to do? Okay, let me give the same access level for the 100 identities. It's better.
It makes people's lives much easier, but the risk that exposes astronomical. I completely agree. The visibility and observability is crucial, especially in a multi-hybrid, cloud SaaS model. Most organizations are using many stacks, and to try and do it at a stack level is impossible. Because you'd have to have, an army of resources just to manage those individual stacks. And that's why it's solutions that deliver solid identity security platforms is the way to go, because it helps you, unify those stacks.
Yeah, I remember I think 8 months ago, I was talking with specifically customer, and he was explaining us something about the challenge that he had for the GCP, permissions, the Google Cloud permissions. So they saw more than 15 users. They, enable the first level of permission, and it's very easy to see this 15 guys. They needed to do a kind of task activities in their company, in this specific company, but they didn't get to do this. So we can saw another custom level of policy. But didn't work, yes. And after that, they give the high privilege for the same 15 guys, because the first level didn't work. The second custom level didn't work. The third one level is administrator full access in the GCP works. Okay, let's give the full access.
Let's just leave it as that.
Yeah, but we this company, okay, this guy just show us 15 guys, okay, but the company has more than, 15,000 employees. So we can imagine how the complexity to protect this environment. Exactly.
Yeah, I remember last year listening to Sean Metcalf's talk on the cloud for Enter ID, and he went through and it's just like the number of possible permissions and entitlements and privileges that you get is just so complex that most people, the majority of companies, just choose the simple defaults with the high privileges, just because they don't have the time, the resources, and the knowledge in order to configure it so tailored that it works in all scenarios.
Yeah, like when you talk about the on-premise environment, okay, usually we have the Active Directory to protect. It can be more than one. If you have the another locations and other different countries, we can do kind of integrations. If you do like to see more the defensive side, we can use it, for example, Bloodhound, and to see in the graphs. It's nice to see, but usually it's more easy to manage that type of thing. However, when you talk about the multi-cloud is huge amount of possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's what Carlos is creating the Purple Panda to help us get that visibility, which was also great. And then there's Lars, who does the Ada launch as well, which is also great. There's so many great tools. Bloodhound's one of my favorite as well.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just important though is to get the different perspectives. This is how attackers look at your infrastructure, and it allows you to start seeing. Bringing a lot of those misconfigurations to the surface, which is ultimately it's a starting point, and to help you map out your journey and how to make sure you get a solid identity security best practices into the organization. But visibility and observability, to your point, is let's see how easy it is to find those misconfigurations and potential risks.
Yeah, if you work with the cybersecurity, for example, there are a bunch of open source tools, of course. There are enterprise tools as well. And like you said, for example, Bloodhound, there are open source and they have an enterprise version as well. But of course, Bloodhound is more focused on Active Directory.
Yeah.
You have, of course, Azure Hound, is more focused on Enter ID, if Microsoft didn't change the name again. But anyway. And for example, for the AWS, you have an AWS PX, for example, is another example of the open source. And there are cartography is another example of the open source project focused on visibility in the cloud in the graphs way, let's say. In this case, cartography, we can integrate with AWS, Azure, GCP. And but like I like one of these specifically too. I don't remember the name, but I can find here during our conversation.
Yeah, we can put it in the show notes afterwards. For sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's not exactly security tools, but they work with the Neo4j database. It works in the same graph way, but they have many collectors. You know, like you can connect with AWS, Azure, GCP, and even you can collect, for example, for CrowdStrike, Trend Micro, and other different sources of identities. And it is interesting because there's just is a simple big data source of many identities. And once you have these in your environment, you have an observability. And that's the interesting thing in the end of the day. So if a security guy, you can implement something more in the security way. But again, in the end of the day, how you can protect things that you cannot see.
And don't know exists and don't know what security is actually protecting them as well. So,
yep.
So a question for yourself. I mean, this is a massive area. And it's always changing, and you always need to stay up to date. How do you stay educated? What's your method of learning? Where do you go for knowledge?
Man, I do many things. Like I have here in my table right now, I'm looking this. I have 7 books there from PAC, for example. And I need to read those books, by the way. 3 is about malware. 2 is about cloud security in the offensive perspective. And 1 is about elevate privilege, how can escalate privilege.
One of my favorite books is the Operator's Handbook by Netmux. That's, if you haven't read it, and you can see my way of taking notes.
Yeah, I will put in my list, definitely. I need to put this in my list.
It is a fantastic, it's great because it gives you not only the kind of Windows and Linux privilege escalation on also Mac, but also does a lot of what you're talking around with the cloud, GCP, AWS. So it's a great book. It hasn't been updated in a while, and it does take a red team, blue team, kind of purple approach, but it is a fantastic book.
Yeah, so I read some books, and I like to. One of my suggestions for the attendees is to see for the Burp Suite Academy. It's a very nice. Yeah, this is fantastic. I'm using usually. I like to share in one of my courses. When I do kind of courses, I like to use this tool, this platform, to teach the people, because they bring the theoretic part, and after that they bring the labs to put in practical way. And if you have a kind of challenge, they have a kind of YouTube channel videos, and they can bring you how you can solve those problems. And with kind of guidance. So they're very interesting, and you can go for different techniques for the offensive security, thinking about the web applications. And there are a bunch of other things that I like to see, kind of, YouTube channels sometimes when I need to do specifically talk, like Jason Hyman or Jedix. There are a bunch of guys, and I like the Philip Wire show.
Philip Wiley's fantastic.
And they will publish probably our conversation in a few days.
IPSec rocks.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like sometimes, because in the end of the day, one of the projects that I like is Hack is Not a Crime. I'm one of the advocates of this project. Yeah. The idea behind of the hacking is not because hacking is really not a crime. It's a
mindset.
Exactly.
It's a methodology.
Exactly. Methodology, creative mindset. And that's the key in the end of the day. So when watching or, hearing some podcasts, you can bring kind of, new ideas. That's the interesting thing. So maybe you have, something technical, like, how you can explore some environments, about the cross-site script SQL injections or blind SQL injection, many other techniques, how you can do the golden ticket exploitation, pass the hash, heap spray, whatever. But okay, so like how the DOS works or DOS works. So how you can use in your creative mindset. So that's things that you can watch in different podcasts, and you heard different minds. So that's I'm learning this way. That's the talk with the people. That's the things.
That's my method as well. Is that reach out, make a connection, and when I actually run into challenges, I'm always reaching out and saying, "Hey, I'm having this problem. Do you have any suggestions?" And they're always
Hmm.
willing to take the time because they're the same as myself and you. We kind of dedicate a lot of our time to educating the world. And we like to surround ourselves and connect with people who do the same, and we're all passionate about that is passing on the knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that I want to start to do kind of research.
Mhm,
I was talking with one guy in Brazil about the critical infrastructure,
mhm.
mainly the energy, and
Yeah.
because I'm for the identity threat labs perspective. So actually, Segura has a very nice concern about
Mhm.
station nation.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying.
I,
Like
I
we
absolutely.
we we totally involved with that, and I want to start some studies and
Mhm,
research about those type of attacks, how it works with the specifically energy things,
mhm.
oil, gas. Because I think it's a kind of environment that we can see many legacy environments, and not only that, but different specifically protocol like SCADA. Like we were talking about that in Brazil.
Yeah.
And I'm starting doing kind of, I will start. I'm not started yet, but I think next month it basically will be happening 4 days. Next month I will start my research about that.
Fantastic. It's actually for me, absolutely. It's an area where you think about systems that they don't have a 3 year or 5 year life cycle. They've got 20 years. When you think about somebody who's creating a
Yeah.
production line for car manufacturing, that's a long production line that tends to have a long life cycle. If you look at, power stations, their life cycle is, 15 to 20 years. A ship, same thing. So the life cycle of them is much longer than your traditional IT systems,
Yeah.
because their production, they want to make a return on investment, and those return on investments typically is 10 to 20 years. And lots of vulnerabilities and lots of discoveries happen in that time, and you just hope that they can patch and fix them.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Filipe, it's so fantastic. I always enjoy talking to you, whether it being in person or online. And we should do this more often. We should make this a more of a kind of a series. Every
Yeah.
couple of months, we will kind of do the latest top trends, what's happening in the industry. So, for the audience, what's the best way for them to stay in touch with you? Is there any conferences, events that you're speaking at in the near future that, if they do happen to be at those events as well, where are you going to be? Where are you on the road?
Actually, I will be talking at the Hacker Summer Camp in August. And
Oh,
yeah, I will be doing 5 talks in a minimal. I received the approval in
that's,
5. Yeah, that's a
That's
huge.
that's a busy busy schedule for anyone at an
Yeah,
event.
yeah, it will be very nice. I like that. So I will talk at Black Hat this year again for the second
Hmm.
year, and I will talk at DEF CON in the Red Team Village,
Hmm.
and I'm a part of the core team as well. So it's a super pleasure to me to help in the community, and I will talk at Cloud Village and
Hmm.
Adversary Village as well, and I'm still waiting for, and besides Las Vegas as well. So I will do a kind of, so they can talk to me
So
during the
that's
conference or in the
7 8
social
days
medias
of
if they want.
events.
And events, yeah, I like it. I like to talk with the people. If they came to me, we can, take some pictures and or not only take pictures, but talk about things. And
Hmm.
and again,
Share lessons. It's
yeah,
always like.
exactly. I love to learn from the
Hmm.
people. And as one of the things that I would like to mention to you is we created in Brazil one initiative we call it the Red Team Community. It's a
Hmm.
very nice because the idea of this community is to putting every people in the same, let's
Hmm.
say, place. We have a Discord channel. We have our is a redteam.org. Redteamcommunity.org is our
Okay.
community. So the idea of this community is to bring the offensive security mindset, and one of my colleagues that found with me, the Oliveira, this is a founder of Hakai, is an offensive
Hmm.
security company focused on Red Team. The idea of this community is to help in different events like, for example, Besides São Paulo, Hacker to Hackers in São Paulo, and other events in Latin America. And to bring this, it's a piece of the DEF CON from these events. Yeah, last year we
Bringing it home.
yeah,
That's something that's
exactly.
important. Yeah.
last year we brought the 4 people from the Red Team Village to Brazil. Was a very nice experience, not for us Brazilian guys, but for the guys from the US, because they had experience to know the Brazilian guy. You had this experience this year, to know how we were very armed, let's say, and that's the key. So it's a very nice project that we started, and I'm totally involved with different communities. And another community that I'm involved with, the Raíces. Cyber is Raíces, it means root, and is focused on Spanish people and Hispanic people and Brazilian people that speaks Portuguese as well. So I work with a lot of communities.
Please do share a lot of the links. I'll add them to the show notes, so it makes it easy for the audience to go and find those resources. So we'll make sure that they're Filipi will share them with me, and I'll make them on the show notes so that everyone can easily find and access them. As always, thank you, and I look forward to chatting with you again soon. Any final wisdom for the audience? Any kind of last words that you would like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I think my advice for the attendees is, the audience is, guys, respect the journey. If you are working with cybersecurity, respect the journey. What I'm saying is, okay, if you start right now in the field, respect the journey. So, studying those bases, understand how the network works, how the system operation works, how the identity works, or each part of the technology works, and after that apply the security concepts, but respect the journey. Like, I'm here as we are talking, talking conference, but I spent 10 years, not 1 month, not 2 months, not 1 year. Spent 10 years. Joy spent 20 years, more than 20 years. So
that's what the gray hairs come in after.
Yeah, he's getting older more than me. No, I'm kidding. Like, respect the journey.
You have to respect it, absolutely, because it becomes your life.
It
becomes part of you, and it becomes part of your DNA and culture ultimately, and your social sphere as well.
I know that sometimes the people is very looking for, I need to move on, I need to increase my salary, I need to grow in my career, but man, respect the journey.
Yeah, enjoy where you are and where you came from.
Exactly. Each part, and learn those bases about everything.
I think that's a fantastic words of advice and wisdom to the audience. So again, many thanks. So for everyone, this is the Security by Default podcast. It's all about bringing security knowledge, wisdom, lessons, leadership, ideas, hot trends, and topics with amazing guests like Filipi. So every 2 weeks, tune in for the next episode, subscribe, provide your feedback. And also, if you're interested in hearing different topics or you would like a special guest, always provide the comments and feedback to me, and I'll be happy to see if they'd be willing to come on this show. So everyone, stay safe, take care, and until the next time, thank you.